So I think we have time for a short panel with some Q&A. If you want to take a seat, Peter, Elif. So do you have comments, questions, surprises?
I noticed earlier that, oh, do I need to say who I am again?
I mean, you did earlier, so
yes,
I think it's okay.
Okay. I noticed earlier that some of the Norwegians were using MMI versus LOD. I'm curious if you guys can explain the difference and when we might want to use one versus the other. I'm based in the US.
Yes, I can take it. The MMI system is based on the information you need to do a specific task, and it's connected to the phases in the project. So it's saying that when you are foresee on coordination of the information for your own discipline, then you are on level 300. When you are on multidisciplinary coordination, you are on 350 and so on. And the system has also been developed because it started with 100, 200, and 300. Now they have divided into 25 elements, so 125, 150, 175, and so on. But it's just specifying the task, what you call it. It's not specifying the content of information, because that is dependent on what you are going to doing. So that is the difference, and that is maybe also the challenge with that system. I do think combination could be useful, because you can say that this is the most used for when you're doing multidisciplinary coordination. You should, for this task, have this and this information, so you don't have to invent the wheel again and reuse it. But it's not saying what information. So if you say that you need very little information, that can be okay if you can do the task.
So one small, and I think Gunnar can comment on this as well, and then Jim should also comment on that. In some parts of the world, the term model maturity index resonated better with professionals than LOD. That gets typically confused as with level of detail versus level of development. It's really intended to be level of development, but too often, sadly, people think it's level of detail. And Jim, I think, explained very well that it is level of development. But I think maybe we can have a comment from Gunnar, but also I think we should have a comment from, if you're okay, Jim.
Yeah. I was part of the development of the first version of the MMI, Model Maturity Index. It was developed because we didn't want the discussion whether it was level of detail or level of development, but now we have the discussion between level of development and MMI. So I guess we are back to square one. But it's basically developed as a language to communicate the level or the maturity of the objects. Very well explained by Jim, showing. But it was not intended to be like the graphic visualization of it. It was more an information of what can you use this information for and what can you not. What is the processes that has been going on internally to develop these? What work is done, what work is not done. So, two sides of the same thing, I would guess.
So at the beginning, when we first started working on level of development, and unfortunately we probably should have picked a different acronym, but we did have that discussion for a long time about whether we should tie it to a use or to the actual geometry, and we came down on the side of, well, let's just talk about the actual geometry and try to make it so that it's useful kind of across the board. Right or wrong, I mean, that's the way, the approach that we took. So it's interesting, these two different approaches, and as I think you mentioned, you know, a combination might really be fruitful.
Hello, my name is Jose Vidal from Conexic, Peru. So I wanted to ask the guy from the SBI guys. Also, I wanted to ask the same question to Evelyn just from the last presentation. So also regarding my experience and background in BIM, where do you think is located the point of balance between the standardization of BIM and also the traditional flexibility that a BIM model could have to work more efficiently, and also considering the nature of our industry?
Who are you addressing this question to?
Well, I don't know if Eric and Thomas, as practitioners, want to comment on that.
I would
that
like to
balance.
hear.
If you want to have a comment on, there's, if everything is standardized, what flexibility do we have? If everything is flexible, then that's the two extremes don't seem quite desirable. Hence, I think the question.
Yes.
I would like to hear from the BIM professor. Eilif.
Yes, as in a way, this is from a academic point of view, a very interesting type of discussion, because it goes back to the understanding of building information modeling and actually about product modeling and specifying what you need to do a specific task. This type of competency or education is maybe missing because we are that applied oriented, because we see a BIM model as defined from a Revit model and you export it to IFC. I do think it's going back to be more aware and see what you need of information to do a specific task, and then you collect the information and reuse it so you get it relevant. And then will be the next step to see on a combination where you can use the LOD systems to see that this is a very good starting point. If you are having this LOD, you know what you're getting of information, but you're not knowing if this is relevant for your specific task. And then you have to add on. And if you can do that in a more standardized way and see that, okay, when you're doing this and this task, we saw that this information was relevant. This should then be standardized based on practical use. So I do think a combination where you, and I wrote a paper about it 10 years ago, where I proposed that, okay, when you know what to do, what information you need, just specify the information. If you don't know what information you need, specify the process. Is this something that you need to have at once? Okay, then you have a track for that. If you can wait to coordinate in a meeting later, okay, you have a track for that. So I do think it has something to maybe to do with the maturity of the industry and to be more aware and more skilled to just do product modeling, specify what you need in a way, and not always jumping into this applied side and a property here and a property there. And I do think standardization based on frequently used can be a way to solve this. But the LOD is a very good starting point, and the MMI is a very good starting point for the language, as Gunnar said, about what you're calling different tasks during the process for it. Yes, maybe a long answer on it, but it's also a topic that is most discussed. Yes?
Yeah, it's always risky to give the microphone to Professor, you know. But maybe Calvin or Jim have a comment on this?
Yeah, I think there's a really there's a key difference here between the graphic information and the non-graphic information, right? The U.S. LOD schema the LOD itself deals only with geometric information. We looked early on at tying the non-graphic information to the geometry, to the LODs, and we decided, you know, you can really attach any non-graphic information you want to an object of any LOD, okay? So and then we found, and this might standardize out, but what we found in working with clients is that every client has a different list of information that they want from the model, the non-graphic information. So we go in and talk with SBI, we go in and talk to the client first, and well, what do you want at the end? And then when can we get that information? And that's the way we'll lay that out. But we didn't tie, we decided consciously not to tie the non-graphic information to the geometric maturity of the element.
Good afternoon, Tyler Davis. I work for Whiting Turner, large general contractor here in the States. My question is mostly for SBI, and you talked a little bit about model as a contract and how that's kind of pushed forward in different states and going forward. One thing that I've noticed in the past couple of years is that there's been a massive insurgence of electronic transfer agreements coming from generally the design side to the general contractor, that they're saying, hey, in order for you to get these digital files, you have to sign this document, and the document generally says it's unreliable and we're not responsible for what you do with it. I'm just, is there any, and from our perspective, that puts us in a contract, with the architect, which in most cases we're not, right? Which is not necessarily an ideal situation. And then two, it's another document to sign. I don't know if there's any feedback or if there's anything coming from the standardization side for that.
Well, yeah, the agreement you're talking about in the AIA Documents Committee, we started calling that the pretty but useless agreement. What we did in the latest version of the E201, the BIM exhibit, is laid out levels of reliability based on the LOD framework. Okay, so at one level, we call them tiers, and at one tier, it's basically that disclaimer that says, you can't rely on it for anything. It specifically says, if you rely on it, it's at your own risk. All right. Then there are two other tiers, one that you can rely on it and one you can rely on it for use as a contract. But it specifies that, and it gets back to that idea of, you either say, well, some of the information in the model is not reliable, so don't rely on any of it, or you specify what you can rely on it, and if you don't specify something, you can't rely on it. So it takes all that unintended information off the table. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that does. So basically, some of the latest AIA contract documents specify, hey, specify what you're going to give to us and put that in there.
Exactly.
And therefore eliminates that, transfer agreement.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the presentations. My name is Shane Saltzgiver with VEC, and we're a VDC service provider here in the US. And my question ties into the discussion that we just had about LOD. One of the biggest challenges that we face is that LOD is specified for all of our projects, specified by either owner rep or architect or GC. But what's really missing from an actual standardization is actually specifying what is required in the model, right? LOD tells us if we are required to have this, then it needs to be developed to a certain LOD or MMI. So most often what we see on projects, general contractor puts together a LOD model matrix, or the architect does, or the owner rep does, and often they're putting it together with, say, misinformation or the incorrect or not the proper experience to really specify what should each design team be including in their model, what should the construction teams be including in their models. And so my question to the group is there another document, is there another standard that's coming out in evolution that takes the LOD that we're applying right now on projects, but bridges that gap all the way back to project inception, that can enable owners, owner reps, these early teams to better specify instead of developing these one-off LOD matrix spreadsheets that sometimes are great, sometimes are not that great. Is there a guiding document like LOD that can help us better specify at project inception who should be modeling what and when should they be modeling it, and then apply the LOD to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way we've approached it is, I mean, you've seen the matrix that lays it out from the early schematics or the concept all the way out into the construction model. The way we've approached it is we've worked with, whether it's an architect or an owner or whatever, what is your business as usual? Because that's not standardized. I mean, there's no real standard on what constitutes 100% DD, right? So 50% DD, really what that usually means is when 50% of the architect's DD fee is burned up. You can, what you can do though is an architect will specify, here's what I mean by SD, DD, and CD, and then the contractor may specify, here's what I need for design level coordination and construction level coordination and so on. And then once you get that baseline laid out, you can tweak it for a project, but the heavy lifting's done, okay? As far as a standard goes, like I say, there really isn't a standard yet. We have a number of sample documents that we've done, but they do vary. They're somewhat consistent, but they vary.
If I could briefly chime in also, I think like how we almost like need an ICE session, working with the owners, working with the project teams to define what they need. And at the same time, blending what VDC is about with ISO 19650 and building spot, it's that we need to also be reminded about the organization requirements, the asset level requirements before we go into a project level requirements. A quick example we showed earlier during the session was the major stadium projects. It turned out that they came up with a very, very lofty kind of like requirements, too much LOD, way too much of those early in the process that ended up to be very much against the production management mindset. So how to really design with the VDC framework, make sure that it's just lean, make sure we don't over ask. When you ask something, make sure that that is useful and can check for that, can automate that. But really to do it right, you should really set up with the organization and the asset information perspective, even before a project is conceived.
All right.
Thank you.
I think we should move the rest of the questions to the wine and cheese session, if that's okay, hopefully. So thank you, panelists and speaker in this session.